Katie Snead, Vehicle Crumple Zones, Life Savings.
Alrighty, so my name is Katie Snead. I'm going to be talking to you about vehicle crumple zones, which have really turned out to be true lifesavers. Really pay attention to that vehicle right there, because I will be going more into depth later on. So I'm going to be talking to you about the background of my project, some equations that we use in the physics and the crumple zones, the history of crumple zones, NHTSA safety regulations, collision testing and the IAHS and their impacts, present time crumple zones, an exponent who does testing, crash dummies, and then what the future holds. So some background terms is going to be crumple zones, also called crush-based control deformations, and a couple other, goes in between. So physics lingo is inertia. Force is the push or pull of an object measured by mass and acceleration. Inertia is a tendency for an object to continue in the state of motion that it's going. I'm stepping too far away from the mic. Velocity is the rate of change that the position changes measured by distance and time. Momentum is how much an object, or how much motion it has measured by mass and velocity. And then kinetic energy, which is energy associated with motion. NHTSA is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. They pretty much make all the laws and regulations cars have to be able to surpass before being able to go into mass manufacturing. So pretty much you have to pass a whole lot of rigorous testing before you're even allowed to make a vehicle. Some safety laws that they have in place right now is like number 201, where the doors actually have to stay closed during impact, because obviously you don't want the doors flying open and you flying out of the car when you get hit. But all of these standards are in place, but then manufacturers have their own choice to go even further than that in their crash worthiness, because the standards only go so far, even though you feel like you're being protected. Some history of the crumple zones. A Hungarian-born engineer actually patented the idea in 1952 when he realized that the cars itself weren't doing any support when it comes to being crashed. They, instead of crumbling or anything, everything would break. They have dramatically changed since the idea has been patented, and they've actually really increased the safetiness of vehicles, because before they were pretty much just huge metal bullets driving down the road. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, otherwise known as IAHS, actually changed the whole path of car safety, because they went and they started testing their own vehicles and pretty much giving everything grades on how well they perform in these tests, even beyond NHTSA's regulations. NHTSA only goes up to 35 miles an hour with their regulations. IAHS actually goes beyond that, because obviously we're driving pretty often above 35 miles an hour. So where are the regulations in place if you were to crash them? They've had a huge impact on the safety of vehicles. Car manufacturers are actually out to be able to get IAHS recognition by becoming top safety picks. That's like the gold medal for them. Some major manufacturers that really go towards that is Volkswagen and Subaru, who are always on the top safety pick, and they're really some of the safest cars out there, and it's not because they go by NHTSA. They follow their regulations, but they go even above and beyond to be able to surpass every other car out there, and IHS has always given them great kudos for that. The testing is pretty much to see how the passenger compartment is impacted. So obviously the goal is to have that entire section not even touched. So all of these tests, that's what they look at. How much of that is actually harmed? So obviously there are some fails, like the 2013 Honda Fit. I'm sorry if anyone drives it, but if you were to crash, you would get hurt. As you can see, it's a little bit dark, but the entire front of the passenger compartment is completely caved in. Your whole legs would have been smashed. Everything would have been broken at that point because it didn't have enough resistance for the force to hit it. Now, as part of my research, I did go to Exponent. They are a testing site located just northwest of the Deer Valley Airport here in this area. And I was able to talk to Mickey Marine, who is an expert in the field. He does recreation testing, and he's pretty much the top dog there when it comes to analysis of car crashes, pretty much. They get to pretty much crash cars for a living, and it's a lot of fun because their testing center is ginormous, and they're able to do all different types of testing. They can test rollover tests and head-on collisions and all the other fun things. And they were actually, not that long ago, Mythbusters came to their own facilities because they have such great ones to be able to test an experiment of their own. So, look in there. So Mythbusters actually came here to test if a 50-mile-an-hour crash would have equal or more impact on the car than a 100-mile-an-hour crash. So this is their experiment.
Impressive 58 Gs, but will doubling the speed double the damage to this car?
It's good. I gotta say that after watching that 50-mile-an-hour crash into the wall, I have a really hard time imagining that the 100-mile-per-hour crash is going to compress the car that much more. I don't know.
So are you ready for some more wanton destruction?
I am! Let's go twice as fast.
All right.
Wanton destruction it is, as the Mythbusters retire to a safe distance and the countdown begins.
You ready to make this happen?
I can't wait. I haven't seen a 100-mile-an-hour crash before.
No. All right, commence with the 100-mile-per-hour crash.
On Adam's command, the engines whir into life, straining to get the car up to exactly 100 miles per hour. It hurtles down the track. The cable uncouples, and the car plows into its final destination. The guys are understandably speechless. That attack crushed the leaden car with such force, it should be in a glass with ice and a cocktail umbrella. All new Myth.
Yeah. That's why you don't speed. But that's also why AHS comes in and Exponent comes in, and they're able to test these higher mile-an-hour crashes to be able to make the crumple zones a little bit more lenient when it comes to actually crumpling around the car instead of completely demolishing you, in fact, and making you dust. Cars are constantly slammed into each other. They have concrete blocks, or they can slam them into other vehicles to see how they can react. They're able to actually recreate pretty much any type of collision you could possibly think of at this testing center, which is what they want to do. A lot of times they have lawyers and court systems come to them to have them recreate what the people are trying to claim is what's happening. They take all those information and they recreate the exam on my mind. They recreate all the collisions, and they're like, well, this is actually what would have happened had these been true. So a lot of times, unfortunately, they do have to go up against, cops and other people and say, I'm sorry, you're wrong, this is the physics behind it. So today, obviously, crumple zones are designed to bend and crumple in the frontal areas and then a little bit on the sides, but there's not as much room between the door and you. But for the most part, the front is the biggest area for crumple zones. And it's really meant to deform to keep the passenger area safe. Kinetic energy is the biggest thing that is converted. It's converted into heat in order to keep all of the energy and force away from you. So they were looking for the perfect car in terms of safety. So the developers behind Maserati and Ferrari actually developed the Nido concept car, which used honeycomb-like technology to crumple within shorter spaces to absorb better. So you don't have to have these huge crumpled zones. You can have little areas without having to actually compromise visual effects. So they want to have a cute car that doesn't completely demolish and crashes. And then crash dummies are obviously a big help in collisions to be able to see how we would actually be affected in the crashes. So obviously we don't want to be in those cars when they're being slammed into other cars. Because as seen as the Mythbusters one, that passenger compartment's completely gone. So they use crash dummies, which are actually really expensive. They're about $10,000 a dummy, to be able to go and pretty much tell exactly how we would feel if we were in the crash. And you can see there's tons of wiring within it. There's even ribs. They can get down if we have a broken rib or even a crushed lung. They're able to definitely analyze every little bit behind it so they know exactly how we would feel, down to puppies. Now, in the future, there are a lot of possibilities in the air, but for the most part, the biggest things being thought about right now is making alternative fuel vehicles safer. The actual batteries in them are not very disposable friendly. They have a bunch of different chemicals within it that make disposing much harder and not safe to just throw away. Another thing is test dummies. Right now, they only use 50 percentile, but those measurements were made in the 90s, and people are a lot bigger nowadays. So if they were able to expand the test size dummies, we'd be able to kind of see more about everyone being able to use rather than just really fit, 5'7" guys, not even like 6 foot, 5'7" guys. And then increase crash resistant technology, because people are the biggest reason that we crash. It's not the car, it's the people behind it. And so scientists are looking at ways to pretty much take the driving out of our hands and make it so that we can still pay attention, but still not have all of the struggles of paying attention. So pretty much like the rollover, there's a bunch of things already in place. Like if their car feels like it's going to roll over, it knows which brakes to hit so that I can kind of refrain from rolling. But they're kind of trying to figure it all out. Google already has it though, but it's not perfected. So I talked to you about the purpose of my project, some definitions and equations, the history and evolution of the crumple zones, NHTSA, IHS, and the exponent testing centers, crash dummies and puppies, and then what's in store for our future. Any questions? All right, thank you.